when we do free trade agreements, governments eliminate trade barriers, tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers like regulation. You harmonize regulations, you streamline regulations, customs procedures, rules of origins. These are non-tariff barriers that you can eliminate or manage from the government side. But what if when we've done all this, then we realize that the private conduct of businesses or group or association of businesses in that market then makes it difficult for real trade to take place.
Now, the topic for this discussion is strengthening Africa's competition and consumer protection frameworks in Africa Continental Free Trade Area, the AfCFTA. Now, our guest is Leonard Ugbaja, competition law, trade policy, and consumer protection specialist, Council Chamber, ECOWAS Regional Competition Authority. So glad to welcome you to Just Africa, Leonard Ugbaja.
Thank you. It's really my pleasure to be here with you and to talk about this important subject.
Now, so let me start. Why are fair competition and consumer protection central, to the success of the AfCFTA?
First, maybe we'll talk what competition. We'll talk about what competition law is supposed to do. So competition law basically regulates business conduct to make sure that there are no cartels or monopolies that disrupt the free flow of businesses, what you call the free flow of market competition. Ideally, businesses should compete on price, should compete on quality, should compete on innovation to get the customer's attention and to get the customer's money. Just like a normal competition, maybe a football game, maybe an athletic event where there are rules, and there are those who also try to game the game, by playing against the rules. So, for example, businesses can come together and agree to fix price. Instead of competing on price, they can come together and decide to share the market, divide the markets among themselves and say, oh, you cover Lagos Island, I will cover mainland. You don't come to my territory, I don't come to your territory, and we don't compete. Or they can also come together and decide to boycott a particular supplier, or customer because they want to enforce their price fixing, or they want to enforce some favorable terms to them. They could say, okay, we're no longer going to sell to B, we're no longer going to buy from B. So these are different ways that businesses can come together to game competition. And there are also businesses that get very powerful so that they can literally decide what happens to the market. They can decide who buys at what amount, what the profit margin is. They can decide whether they will sell or deal with particular businesses, especially when they think that other businesses will be a threat to them. They can also decide to acquire businesses that are potential competitions that will disrupt their market share and all that. So the idea is that let there be competition, the consumers will benefit because there's competition. The consumers benefit because businesses are trying to lower price, trying to innovate, trying to create more value generally for the consumer, rather than businesses devising means of extracting more money from the consumer without adding much value to the consumer. So that on the basics, that's what competition law is all about. So it's about protecting the consumer interest in trade. Now, if you take this to the regional trading arrangement, so it's usual when you talk about competition law within a national context, you're trying to make sure that national markets function optimally, function efficiently for the interest of the consumers and the economy as a whole. But when you take it to the regional arrangement, like we're having under the AfCFTA, what you're seeing is that now trade agreements, by their nature, eliminate government-imposed restrictions on trade. And there are two of those, the two most common restrictions that governments impose on trade is tariff and non-tariff barriers. Now, what are tariffs? Tariffs are basically the customs duties. So Nigeria could decide to charge a custom duties of 35% plus 35% levy on imported vehicles, or charge 10% on textiles, or charge whatever amount. Those are custom duties. Now, the concept of free trade and progressive liberalization of trade says that, governments negotiate to reduce tariff among themselves. especially in a regional integration setting. So you want to lower the tariffs and in some cases eliminate the tariffs where you think the tariffs don't make any sense, economic sense. Now, this is government imposed restriction. Now, imagine a scenario where under the AfCFTA or the ECOWAS regional trade arrangement, where the governments in the of the different countries have come together to negotiate and they've decided to reduce the tariff. But the businessman from Nigeria then tries to take his products to, say, Benin Republic to sell, and he gets there and he realizes that there's a cartel that controls that market, and that unless he sells to them, he cannot sell directly to the local market. Or unless he sells at the price they have fixed, he cannot sell directly to the market. Or possibly, if they have control of the warehousing arrangement through which those goods are distributed, they could decide that they would not grant him access to their warehouse, even if he's willing to pay them. And they will make sure that he does not buy land maybe in the area where they operate to be able to build his own warehouse. So what are you saying? You're seeing private business conduct disrupting trade after government, through trade negotiation, has eliminated the government-imposed barrier. So the logic is that when we do free trade agreements, governments eliminate trade barriers, tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers like regulation. You harmonize regulations, you streamline regulations, customs procedures, rules of origins. These are non-tariff barriers that you can eliminate or manage from the government side. But what if when we've done all this, then we realize that the private conduct of businesses or group or association of businesses in that market then makes it difficult for real trade to take place.
All right.
So that's where competition law comes into trade agreements.
Yeah, it really sounds beautiful. But as beautiful as it may sound right now, I believe there are some challenges that we're likely to face as we enter into this era. Can you let us know some of these challenges, especially as it affects small, medium businesses?
I think from what I've said earlier, the challenges are just obvious. So let's take the example of probably say someone who produces plastics in Lagos. If you produce plastic in Lagos, you should be able to trade your products across the West African region under the ECOWAS, trade liberalization scheme. Now, so what if when you get to, say, Togo or Ghana to sell your plastics, and then you realize that the market association, for example, there will not allow you to sell. Now, that's on a very low level, But at a higher level, we realize that there is a big manufacturer of plastics in Ghana whom haven't seen that you're coming with your own plastic products that are competitive price-wise, then can do one or two things. He will either deny you access to the distribution network if you need distributors to sell. So he'll go to all the distributors and say, make sure you do not distribute for this person. Otherwise I'll stop supplying you, or some kind of penalty, Or he could use another tactics, basically reduce the prices of his own product to the extent where it neither makes commercial sense for you or makes commercial sense for him. But his target is, if I keep these prices artificially low for the next 6 months, I'll push this new person coming from Lagos out of this market, and then I can raise my prices high and recover the loss. That is predatory pricing, classic, So it happens among businesses within the same territory, but it also happens when businesses want to take advantage of trade agreements to do businesses across the border. The conduct of existing businesses can become a higher barrier than government policy or tariff. That is the logic of it.
All right, thank you very much. So, what, in your own experience, what remedy do you suggest for all this anti-competitive, practice? How can we overcome it? How can African countries, what can they do?
Well, it's about creating the legal frameworks. That's important. Africa is new. Africa as a whole is relatively new to the global discussion on competition law. Some of the most advanced competition law regimes in Africa are less than 30 years old. South Africa, for example, Nigeria just we got our own competition regime in 2019, and even now, implementation is still not as aggressive, so to say. Some other countries within the region don't yet have national frameworks. Ghana doesn't. Sierra Leone doesn't. In fact, I'm in Sierra Leone right now. That's one of the things we're working on. Sierra Leone doesn't, and a few other countries don't. Now, we have at the ECOWAS level covering the region. So we need the national governments to develop their own national regime. But beyond that, there's a whole lot of need for sensitization. Businesses would have to understand what the rules are, what you can do and what you cannot do in their businesses. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of sensitization, but not stopping at sensitization. There has to be enforcement. Take some test cases and force to open up the market. If you don't open up the market, then trade would not happen. So set up the legal framework, build a lot of awareness around it, and then enforce the laws to make sure that businesses don't take advantage of their market position to exclude competition from other businesses.
How do we ensure that these laws are respected, not just in another country, but even at the border point? Because you're talking about ensuring that people respect the rules and all that. How do we ensure? Because we are Africans, so people don't cut corners. Looking at the rate at which fake products are produced, how things are being moved from one country to another. How do we ensure that countries, borders respect these rules, these laws you're talking about?
An important question, because even the whole trade agreement thing, whether we're looking at ECOWAS or the AfCFTA, we still have that problem of compliance, because most times countries come sign up to these agreements, they go home, and the officials who are supposed to implement them behave as if no agreement has been signed. So again, it comes back to that question of sensitization. But beyond sensitization, there has to be consequences, and that's where enforcement comes in. So I'll give you a typical example how it works in the textbook, even though this is not how it may be working in real life right now. So if we sign these agreements and one country does not, or the officials of one country at the border do not comply with these rules, then the other member states who are party to this have the right to take legal action against that country that is not complying. And that's why we have the ECOWAS Court of Justice. And that's why we have the ECOWAS Regional Competition Authority, where I'm a council member. We are supposed to receive complaints about non-compliers who take out investigation, and we issue penalties. Now, even when you issue penalties or enforcement directions, the question will also arise as to the mechanism of enforcing those directives at the national level. And we are working on all that, and it's an ongoing thing. But at the end of the day, what I need to say, and like I've said in some of my write-ups in the past, is that, for Africa to make considerable progress in regional integration, we have to follow a rules-based approach, which means we should be willing to subject ourselves to the rule and also be willing to call out countries who don't subject themselves to the rule. Not just calling them out on the pages of newspaper or diplomatic meetings, but testing their non-compliance in the ECOWAS Court of Justice. That is how the European Union built their regional market, because the courts played an active role in making sure that member states complied with their commitments. And that's the way forward for Africa.
All right. Now, so that's the angle I want to come in right now. Enforcement. How do we even enforce this? Because for us to enforce it, it means both countries have to, abide by these laws. And in a situation whereby they don't abide, yes, okay, we take it to ECOWAS court. How do we now make it enforceable? That both countries, from the buyer and the market, they both comply.
Like again, I'll say the rules are there. The rules have not been tested so much. the rules within ECOWAS have been tested more in terms of human rights. So there's been a lot of decisions of the ECOWAS Court of Justice on human rights issues against countries. Some of the countries have complied with many of those decisions. Some countries have not complied with the decisions, and that's where you are looking at what the sanction mechanisms are. By the rules, if a country refuses to comply with the orders of the court or with its obligation, that country can be subjected to curtailment of privileges within the ECOWAS setting. So, for example, maybe the country may not be allowed to hold the presidency of the commission when it gets to its own turn to take the presidency, the commission. It just curtail the privileges that the country can enjoy from being membership in the membership of ECOWAS. You can also go as far as denying businesses from that country the access to the market of other member states. Now, but where we are right now at our integration in Africa as a whole is that even when there are violations, we hardly go all the way out to the point of sanction. And that's where we need to do a lot of work. Instead of glossing over violations, we need to go all the way out to apply the rules and apply the rules strictly.
All right. Also, if you look at other regional blocs, like the EU and COMESA, what can we copy? What lessons or policies can we copy? Can African, countries copy from, these successful regional blocs?
Okay, so let me start from COMESA, which is in Africa. So in terms of competition law, the COMESA competition regime is the most advanced in Africa. They've been able to make quite some, far-reaching decisions, and those decisions have had far-reaching effects in the market. Now, compliance, when you're dealing with sovereign states in the international system, compliance is mostly a question of what you call moral suasion. You have to persuade countries to comply. That's the baseline. But if you then move away and go to a region like the European Union, compliance is not basically an issue of persuasion. Compliance is a legal issue. So that when the European Commission or the Court of Justice of the European Union makes a decision, a member state is bound to comply with it. So compliance is first of all a culture. It's just like saying obedience to the law. Some people obey the law because that's the right thing to do. There's some people you need to apply coercion or some sanctions for them to obey the law. So you have a region like the EU that has quite advanced in terms of countries obeying the law because they know it's in their best interest to be a part of the union and to continue to reap the benefits. So then I come back to that question again. What can we learn? What we should learn is that we have to apply the sanctions and apply them strictly. How and when we will get there, I don't know. But that's critical to advancing our regional integration in Africa.
The consumers themselves have a role to play. Do they have roles to play as regarding their rights?
Definitely. So we expect the consumers to bring the complaint. So consumer rights violations, competition law violations. So consumer rights are not exactly, consumer protection is not exactly the same thing as competition law, although competition law aims to protect the consumer. So whether the rights of a consumer is violated in trade, whether cross-border trade or within border trade, it's expected that the consumer makes the complaint. In Nigeria, the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission has the portal, the online portal where you can make the complaint, or you can send it as a letter, or you can walk into their offices across the country, make your complaint. If it has a cross-border connotation or connection or dimension, you report to the ECOWAS Regional Competition Authority using the available tools on the website to make your report. So yeah, the consumers need to be vigilant. They need to know their rights. And again, that goes back to the sensitization that I talked about. But they need to be vigilant and report, especially the enlightened consumers. The problem is that most times, even the enlightened people say, oh, let's leave it to God. Say nothing will happen even if we report. But now, if that's your approach, how then would you improve the system for the people who don't have the voice or who don't have the capacity to speak out for themselves. So it behoves on us who are enlightened and who have access to these internet tools to seek to advance consumer rights, because in doing so, we are advancing the consumer rights of those who are voiceless.
Thank you very much, Leonard Gbaja. I wish we had more time. This is a very robust topic.
I wish so. I'm really sorry I didn't join you on time as I was supposed to.
We'll definitely bring you some other time. Thank you for your thoughts and thank you for joining us on Just Africa.
Thank you.
You're welcome.